"Dad, my wife put you in your place, and you just took it like a coward." My son Josh's words echoed through the crowded dining room, breaking the silence that had settled after the most humiliating confrontation of my life. 25 people were watching us, relatives, close friends, all invited to the first Thanksgiving that Josh and his wife Amanda were hosting for the family. Amanda stood next to the main table, her arms crossed, a satisfied smile on her face as she stared at me with contempt. At 23, she had just done something no one in 60 years had been able to do, reduce me to complete silence in front of my own family. "Kevin, did you hear what your son said?" she asked, her voice laden with condescension. "Or do I need to repeat it more slowly?" My name is Kevin Hartwell, and at 60 years old, I have built a reputation as the respected patriarch of a family that has always valued tradition, mutual respect, and dignity. For 4 decades, I was the man everyone turned to when they needed advice, loans, or just a word of encouragement. My home has always been the center of family gatherings, my backyard the place where generations connected. Until Amanda joined our family 6 months ago. She had started subtly. Little comments about how my house was outdated, how my stories were boring, how my values were old-fashioned for modern times. Josh, completely spellbound by his new wife, always took her side, laughing when she corrected me publicly or changing the subject when I tried to share life experiences. But today she had crossed a line I never thought possible. "Josh told me you spent $15,000 on the kitchen renovation without consulting anyone," she continued, walking around the table like a predator circling its prey. $15,000 that could have been invested in your son's future. In our new house. In our first baby. The blood rushed to my cheeks. That renovation had been a gift to my late wife Marie, completed 3 months before she died of cancer. Every detail chosen based on conversations we had during 50 years of marriage. Amanda knew that. Josh knew that. Everyone in the room knew that. "Amanda, that's not," I began, but she raised her hand, cutting me off as if I were a naughty child. "It's not what? It's none of my business? Kevin, I'm part of this family now. And families don't hide irresponsible spending from each other." She turned to Josh, who nodded vigorously. I told my Josh about how my father manages the family finances. Total transparency. Joint decisions. Not these selfish secrets from a generation that thinks it knows better than everyone else. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, a mixture of anger and humiliation I hadn't experienced since childhood. Marie always said Amanda had a manipulative side, but Josh was so in love he refused to see it. Now, watching my own son look at me with disappointment, I realized I had lost much more than a family argument. The silence in the room was deafening. My sister Susan fidgeted nervously with her napkin. My brother-in-law Robert studied his plate as if it held the answer to the mysteries of the universe. Even my brother Thomas, usually the first to break the tension with jokes, remained completely still. "Well?" Amanda pressed, her voice now laden with theatrical impatience. "Aren't you going to defend yourself? Or will you finally admit that your selfish actions are hindering the progress of this family?" It was at that moment that something inside me broke. Or maybe it grew stronger. As I looked at Amanda's triumphant face and my son's approving expression, a strange calm settled over me. It was as if a familiar voice whispered in my ear, reminding me of lessons I had temporarily forgotten. Marie always told me, "Kevin, some battles you lose in order to win the war. And some people only show their true colors when they think they're winning." If you're following this story of family manipulation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how small moments of humiliation can turn into revelations that change everything. Because while Amanda savored her apparent victory and Josh took pride in finally putting his father in his place, neither of them noticed what was about to happen. Thomas had slowly risen from his chair, his hands reaching for something in his jacket's inside pocket. And when he began to speak, his voice carried a tone I hadn't heard in 20 years. "Amanda," Thomas said, his voice cutting through the air like a sharp blade, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Everyone in the room turned to him. My brother Thomas had always been the kind of man who commanded attention without asking for it. At 62, 2 years older than me, he carried a presence that came from decades of building companies from scratch and dismantling empires when necessary. Amanda laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that echoed around the room. "Oh, look who finally decided to speak up. The big brother trying to save baby Kevin from the family." She turned to Josh, seeking support. "Honey, You told me how your Uncle Thomas always spoiled your father, didn't you? Josh nodded vigorously, clearly intoxicated by the confidence Amanda gave him. Uncle Thomas, with all due respect, Dad needs to learn to accept change. Amanda is just trying to help our family be more modern, more, he gestured vaguely, transparent. It was then that Thomas pulled a yellow envelope from his inside jacket pocket, placing it carefully on the table. The paper was heavy, official, with the letterhead of a law firm I recognized immediately, Hartwell and Associates. The firm Thomas had founded 30 years ago and now had branches in 12 states. Amanda, Thomas continued, his voice maintaining that dangerously calm tone, you seem to have a very interesting understanding of financial transparency. Especially considering you've spent the last 6 months investigating the Hartwell family's finances without authorization. Amanda's smile faltered for a split second before returning, even brighter. Investigating? What a dramatic word, Thomas. I'm just trying to understand how this family works so I can better contribute. Contribute, Thomas repeated, as if savoring the word. That's an interesting way to describe what you've been doing. He opened the envelope with deliberate movements, removing a stack of documents. For example, your attempt to access information about Marie's trust account through Josh. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. Marie's trust account was sacred, established years before her death to ensure that certain family traditions and donations would continue even after we were gone. Josh knew of its existence, but had never had access to the specific financial details. I didn't, Amanda began, but Thomas raised a hand, silencing her. Or your visit to the central bank last week, where you introduced yourself as the Hartwell family's future power of attorney, and attempted to obtain information about long-term investments. Thomas placed a series of photographs on the table. Security camera footage is very useful these days. Josh was pale, looking between Amanda and the photographs as if he were seeing his wife for the first time. Amanda, you told me you were going shopping. Josh, honey, I can explain. Amanda tried to reach for his hand, but Josh instinctively pulled away. Thomas wasn't finished. But my favorite discovery, he continued, pulling out another document, was your consultation with a divorce lawyer 3 weeks ago. Apparently, you wanted to understand exactly what your rights would be regarding family property if your marriage to Josh didn't work out. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the ticking of Marie's antique clock in the adjacent room, a sound I had always found comforting, but now it seemed to be counting down the seconds to an inevitable explosion. Amanda had become a statue, her expression frozen in a mask of false indignation. But I could see something new in her eyes now, genuine fear. This is invasion of privacy, she finally managed to say, her voice losing all its previous confidence. You have no right to investigate my private life. Privacy. Thomas laughed, a humorless sound. Amanda, dear, you lost any right to privacy the moment you decided to try to defraud my family. He turned to Josh, his tone softening. Josh, your father didn't tell you about the $15,000 for the kitchen renovation because it wasn't $15,000. We all looked at Thomas, confused. It was $150,000, he revealed. Kevin spent $150,000 turning that kitchen into the dream his mother had designed over 50 years of marriage. Every detail customized, every finish imported, every appliance selected specifically because Marie once commented that it would be perfect. Tears began to roll down my face. Thomas knew the truth because he was the one who helped me find the skilled craftsmen. He was the one who connected with the European suppliers. He was the one who made sure everything was installed while Marie was in the hospital undergoing chemotherapy. And he didn't tell you, Thomas continued, because he didn't want anyone to feel obligated to contribute or feel guilty for not having thought of it first. This renovation wasn't an irresponsible expense, Amanda. It was a final gift of love to a woman who dedicated her entire life to making this house a home for the whole family. Josh was crying now, his hands covering his face. Dad, I didn't know. But Thomas wasn't done with Amanda yet. What puzzles me, Amanda, is how you found out about any figures related to the renovation. That information wasn't in any document Josh would have access to. He stared directly at her. Unless you used more creative methods to obtain that information. That's when I realized the terrible truth. Amanda hadn't just investigated our finances out of curiosity or ambition. There was a bigger plan at work, something Thomas had discovered that I didn't yet fully understand. Kevin, Thomas said, turning to me, I think it's time you knew the whole truth about who your daughter-in-law really is. The yellow envelope still had documents inside, documents that Thomas hadn't revealed yet. And from the look on Amanda's face, those documents contained information that could destroy much more than just a marriage. Thomas opened the envelope completely and spread a series of documents across the mahogany dining room table. Photographs, bank statements, employment records, and what appeared to be a multi-page private investigation report. Amanda Richardson, Thomas began, reading from one of the documents. Or should I say Amanda Stevens? Or perhaps Amanda Mitchell? He looked directly at her. Which name would you prefer we use today? Amanda's face had lost all color, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to maintain her composure. Josh was looking between his wife and my brother with an expression of complete confusion. Thomas, what are you talking about? Josh asked, his voice laden with growing desperation. Your uncle is talking about an illegal investigation, Amanda tried to recover, but her voice was visibly shaky. This is harassment and invasion of privacy. I'm going to sue you for defamation. Thomas laughed again, that cold, calculated sound I only heard when he was about to destroy someone in business. Defamation requires the statements to be false, Amanda. And everything I'm sharing is documented and verifiable. He picked up a photograph and placed it in front of Josh. This is your wife 2 years ago, using the name Amanda Stevens, being arrested for marriage fraud in Portland, Oregon. She married a 73-year-old man named Harold Stevens, cleaned out his accounts in 6 months, and disappeared. Josh took the photograph with trembling hands. It was undeniably Amanda, younger, but definitely her. Different hair, different clothes, but the same face, the same eyes he had kissed at the altar just 6 months ago. This has to be a mistake, Josh whispered, but his conviction was clearly shaken. Harold Stevens died of a heart attack 3 weeks after Amanda disappeared, Thomas continued relentlessly. His family never got the money back. $500,000 in lifetime savings simply evaporated. Amanda had stood up, walking toward the door, but Thomas wasn't finished. Sit down, Amanda, his voice carried an authority that made everyone in the room, including Amanda, freeze. I haven't finished presenting your complete biography to the family. She slowly returned to her chair but remained standing, her hands clutching the backrest as if she needed the physical support. Before Harold Stevens, there was Robert Mitchell in Sacramento. Thomas picked up another document. A marriage that lasted 4 months. He lost his construction company and his house. Before him, David Richardson in Las Vegas. 3 months of marriage, $120,000 gone. Josh was pale as a ghost, staring at Amanda as if he had never seen her before. Amanda, tell me this isn't true. Tell me there's an explanation. That was when Amanda made the mistake that completely revealed her true nature. Instead of trying to explain, justify, or even lie convincingly, she lashed out with the vicious rage of someone who had been cornered. So what? She shouted, the whole facade of sweet wife evaporating instantly. So what if I married some pathetic, stupid men who were willing to throw money at me? They were idiots who deserved to be cheated. The silence that followed was devastating. Josh had physically recoiled, as if she had slapped him. I work hard to get what I want, Amanda continued, clearly losing control completely. Unlike you privileged people who inherited everything and never had to fight for anything in life. Josh was an easy target with his family money and his pathetic naivety. It was at that moment that I saw my son break down. Tears began to roll down his face as he looked at the woman he had promised to love forever. You never loved me, he managed to ask, his voice just a whisper. Amanda laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. Josh, honey, you're a 25-year-old boy who still lives in Daddy's house and needs permission to buy a car. Did you really think a woman like me would be genuinely interested in you? Thomas rose slowly, his presence filling the room. Amanda, you have approximately 5 minutes to leave this house before I call the authorities. There are active arrest warrants against you in 3 states. You can't kick me out, she replied, but fear was clearly returning to her voice. This is Josh's house too. Actually, Thomas said, picking up another document, this house belongs to a family trust established by our parents 40 years ago. Josh has the right of residence, but not legal ownership. And as the trustee, I have the authority to remove anyone who poses a threat to the beneficiaries. Josh was looking at me now, his eyes filled with shame and regret. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I should have listened to you and Mom." For the first time since this humiliation began, I felt something other than pain. A mixture of relief and paternal protectiveness that had been dormant during months of disrespect and manipulation. "Josh," I said softly, "you were the victim of a professional predator. This is not your fault." Amanda had started to move toward the stairs, clearly planning to go to her room to get her belongings, but Thomas intercepted her. "Your belongings have already been packed," he said calmly. "They're in the trunk of my car. You're going to walk out the front door right now, and you're never coming back." It was at that moment that I realized Thomas had planned this whole revelation. It was no accident that he had those documents in his pocket during Thanksgiving dinner. He had investigated Amanda, discovered her true identity, and chosen the perfect moment to expose her in front of the whole family. "How did you find out?" I asked Thomas as Amanda hurried up the stairs, probably to check if her belongings had indeed been removed. "Marie asked me to," Thomas replied simply. "2 weeks before she died, she called me and said there was something wrong with Amanda. That she was asking too many questions about money and property. Marie made me promise that I would protect you and Josh." Fresh tears stung my eyes. Even in her final days, Marie had been protecting our family. She had seen through Amanda's facade when the rest of us were blinded by Josh's apparent happiness. Amanda came downstairs 5 minutes later, carrying only a small bag. Her face was red with anger, but she had regained some of her composure. "This isn't over," she said, looking directly at me. "I'll be back. And when I am, you'll regret messing with me." Thomas positioned himself between her and the rest of the family. "Amanda, you're leaving now, and you're never coming back. If we ever see you near this property or near any member of this family again, the authorities will be notified immediately." She walked out the front door, slamming it hard enough to make the windows rattle. The silence that followed was different from before. It was no longer tense or uncomfortable, but reflective, as if the whole family was collectively processing what had just happened. Josh approached me, his tears now flowing freely. "Dad, can you forgive me? I said terrible things to you. I let her humiliate you in your own home." I hugged my son for the first time in months, feeling him tremble against my chest. "Josh, there's nothing to forgive. You were manipulated by an expert. The important thing is that you can now see the truth." But as I comforted my son and felt our family slowly begin to heal, part of me couldn't forget Amanda's final words. "This isn't over." There was a sinister promise in those words that made me think our ordeal with her was far from over. And I was right. Because 3 days later, Josh received a call that would change everything again. The call came on a Wednesday, 3 days after Amanda left our house. Josh was in the kitchen with me, trying to rebuild our relationship through conversations about his mother's recipes, when his phone rang. "It's her," Josh said, looking at the screen with a mixture of fear and disgust. "Amanda." "Answer it," Thomas said, appearing at the kitchen door. He had spent the last 3 days with us, helping Josh process the betrayal and helping me understand the extent of the investigations he had done on Amanda. "But put it on speakerphone." Josh hesitated for a moment before accepting the call. "Josh, honey," Amanda's voice sounded through the speaker, sweet as honey, as if nothing had happened. "I hope you've had time to think about what happened. About how your family treated me." "Amanda," Josh began, his voice trembling, "you lied to me about everything. You—" "I what, Josh?" she interrupted, her voice hardening. "I married you? I lived in your house? I tried to integrate myself into a family that rejected me from day one? Your uncle presented information that was clearly doctored, probably falsified." Thomas motioned for Josh to continue talking as he discreetly began recording the conversation on his own phone. "The photographs, Amanda," Josh said, gathering his courage. "It was you in the photographs. You can't deny that." Amanda laughed, a calculated, manipulative sound. "Josh, there are people who look like other people. There are computer programs that can alter photographs. Your uncle is a wealthy lawyer with connections. Do you really think it would be difficult for him to fabricate evidence against someone he didn't like from the beginning?" He could see Josh wavering, confusion returning to his face. Amanda was good at what she did, very good. She was planting seeds of doubt even after she had been completely exposed. But Amanda, Josh tried again, you said terrible things in the house. You admitted. What did I say? That I was being attacked by your family and reacted defensively? Josh, when someone falsely accuses you of terrible crimes, when they publicly humiliate you, when they kick you out of your own home, don't you react? Don't you say things you don't necessarily mean? Thomas looked at me with an expression I knew well. It was the same expression he had when he was dealing with a particularly cunning opponent in court. Amanda was rewriting the narrative in real time, and she was much smarter than any of us had initially imagined. Josh, Amanda continued, her voice now laden with convincing tears. I love you. I know I've made mistakes, that I haven't been perfect, but what marriage is perfect? I'm calling because I want you to know that I'm willing to start over. To work on our problems. Where are you? Josh asked, and I could see Thomas quickly jotting down notes on a pad. I'm in a cheap hotel downtown, she replied. I spent almost all the money I had saved for our honeymoon trying to find a lawyer to help me clear my name. Josh, I need you. I need you to give me a chance to explain everything properly. It was at that moment that Thomas took the phone from Josh's hands. Amanda, he said, his voice professional and cold, this is Thomas Hartwell. If you have evidence that the information I presented was falsified, I encourage you to contact the appropriate authorities. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Thomas, Amanda finally replied, her voice losing all of its previous sweetness, you made a big mistake messing with me. I have resources you can't even imagine. And I have patience. Resources? Thomas repeated, clearly intrigued. Do you think I work alone? Amanda laughed again, but this time the sound was genuinely sinister. Do you think I'm just a desperate woman trying to survive? Thomas, you and your family have no idea who you're dealing with. The line was silent for a moment before Amanda continued. Josh only knows one version of me. The version he needed to know. But there are other versions, Thomas. Versions that know how to deal with rich and powerful families who think they can just throw people away like trash. Thomas was scribbling furiously in his notebook now, clearly recording every word. In 72 hours, Amanda said, her voice now completely transformed into something cold and calculated, you're going to have a visit. Not from the authorities. Not from lawyers. From people who understand how to solve problems, permanently. The call ended. The silence that followed was unlike anything we had experienced in the last few days. It wasn't the silence of shock or confusion, but of genuine fear. Thomas, I said, my voice coming out lower than I intended, what is she talking about? Thomas placed the phone on the table and sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. Kevin, I made a mistake. A very big mistake. What kind of mistake? Josh asked, his voice thick with rising panic. When I investigated Amanda, I focused on her previous marriages and financial activities. But I didn't dig deeply into her associations. Thomas ran his hands through his hair. There were vague references to business partners in the reports, but I assumed they were just other small-time con artists. He pulled out his laptop and began typing rapidly. But that call, he stopped typing and looked at us. That call suggests that Amanda is part of something much bigger. An organization. Possibly organized crime. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. Organized crime. Fraudulent marriage schemes are often multi-person operations, Thomas explained, returning to typing. One person does the legwork, others provide false identities, documentation, legal support when necessary. And when something goes wrong. He didn't need to finish the sentence. If you're following this escalation from a simple family exposure to something much more dangerous, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happened next proved that even the most prepared families can completely underestimate the extent of the threat they face. Josh was pale, looking between Thomas and me as if he expected one of us to say it was all a misunderstanding. So what do we do now? He asked. Thomas closed his laptop and stood up. Now we do something we should have done from the beginning. We call in real professionals. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he clearly knew by heart. Marcus? This is Thomas Hartwell. I need your services. No, it's not a legal case. It's the other kind of problem. As Thomas spoke in code that I didn't fully understand, I began to realize that our situation had turned into something far beyond family drama. Amanda wasn't just an opportunistic con artist. She was part of something bigger, something organized, something that had the resources to solve problems permanently. And we had just become one of those problems. The next 72 hours would determine whether we could protect our family or whether we had inadvertently declared war on forces we were not prepared to face. Marcus arrived the next morning, a 50-year-old man with the unassuming appearance of an accountant, but eyes that had seen things I didn't want to imagine. He sat in my living room as if he were discussing investments, but the words that came out of his mouth belonged to a completely different world. "Thomas told me about your situation," Marcus said, placing a black briefcase on the coffee table. "Amanda Richardson has been known to us for 3 years. She is part of a Detroit-based operation specializing in fraudulent marriages targeting families with significant assets." Josh was pale, absorbing every word as if it were a punch in the stomach. "Her organization has a specific method," Marcus continued. "First, they identify targets through social media, public records, and social events. Then Amanda or one of the other operators approaches the target, always with a completely fabricated identity." He opened the folder, revealing photographs of Amanda with different appearances and names. Short, blonde hair as Sarah Mitchell, long brunette hair as Jennifer Parker, red hair as Ashley Thompson. "Each identity has a complete history," Marcus explained. "A fake employment history, fabricated references, even a supportive family that confirms their stories when necessary." Thomas was taking notes furiously. "And when something goes wrong?" "That's where the problem comes in," Marcus replied, his expression becoming more serious. "The organization has a conflict resolution department. People who make inconvenient questions disappear. Not necessarily dead, but forced relocation. Convenient accidents. Legal problems that come out of nowhere." I felt my stomach churn. "Are you saying we're in real danger?" "Were," Marcus corrected. "Until 2 hours ago." We all looked at him, confused. Marcus smiled for the first time since he arrived. "You're not the first victims of this organization, and Amanda isn't as smart as she thinks she is. Thomas gave me enough information to connect Amanda to at least 7 other similar cases in the last 2 years." He pulled out his phone and showed us a series of messages. At 6 o'clock this morning, federal agents simultaneously arrested 12 members of the organization in 5 different states. Amanda was one of the first. Josh stood up abruptly. "They arrested Amanda?" "Attempted murder, wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering," Marcus listed. "She's facing at least 20 years in federal prison." That's when my phone rang. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. "Amanda. How is she calling if she's been arrested?" Josh asked, looking like he was about to panic. Marcus motioned for me to answer it, but to put it on speakerphone. "This call is being monitored and recorded," he whispered. I accepted the call with trembling hands. "Kevin," Amanda's voice sounded desperate, completely different from yesterday's menacing confidence. "I need to talk to Josh. Please." "Amanda," Thomas stepped in, "this is Thomas Hartwell again. I understand you're facing some legal difficulties at the moment." There was a long pause. "Thomas, you don't understand. I can make a deal. I can give you information about people much more dangerous than me. But I need Josh to help me with bail." Josh was staring at the phone as if it were a poisonous snake. "How much is the bail, Amanda?" Thomas asked, clearly amused. $2 million, she replied, her voice breaking. "Josh, please. You know I love you. Everything I did was to protect our future. The charges are exaggerated, there." "Amanda," Josh finally spoke, his voice surprisingly firm. "You lied about everything. About who you are, about loving me, about wanting a family. You're a professional criminal." "Josh, no." Amanda cried. "You don't understand. If I don't get bail, they'll kill me in prison. These people don't mess around." Marcus signaled to Thomas, who nodded. "Amanda," Thomas said, "I'm curious about something. You mentioned yesterday that we would have a visitor in 72 hours. Who exactly?" There was complete silence on the other end of the line. "Amanda." Thomas pressed. They're not coming anymore," she finally admitted. "They've all been arrested. The FBI knew everything. Someone turned them in." It was then that Marcus revealed the most impressive part of the whole plan. "Amanda," he said, identifying himself for the first time, "this is Special Agent Marcus Chun, FBI. I've been at the Hartwell family home for 3 hours, recording this conversation." The silence that followed was deafening. "Thomas," Marcus continued, turning to my brother, "called me because he recognized your description of Amanda's threat. Our department has been investigating this organization for 2 years. Yesterday's call, where Amanda mentioned solving problems permanently, gave us probable cause to expedite the arrests." Josh slumped heavily into his chair. "So, it was all a trap?" "Not exactly," Marcus explained. "Amanda was indeed part of a criminal organization. The threats were real. But when Thomas came to me, we realized we had a unique opportunity to capture the entire network." Thomas was smiling now, a smile I hadn't seen since we were mischievous kids getting into trouble together. "Kevin," he said, "remember when we were little and I always said I wanted to be a cop when I grew up?" I nodded, confused about where this was going. "Well, I never became a cop. But I did specialize in federal criminal law. And for the past 5 years, I've been working as a consultant for the FBI on sophisticated financial fraud cases." My mind was struggling to process this revelation. You work for the FBI?" "Freelance consultant," Thomas corrected. "When Amanda made those threats yesterday, I didn't call a shady friend. I called my contact at the bureau. Marcus and I have worked together on at least 10 similar cases." I looked at Marcus, who confirmed with a nod. "The most impressive part," Marcus added, "is that Amanda truly believed she had successfully intimidated you. She called her supervisors at the organization last night, bragging about how she had neutralized the Hartwell threat. That call gave us the phone numbers and locations of all the remaining members." From the phone, I could still hear Amanda crying. "Please," she begged. "Josh, you can't just abandon me here. I'm your wife." Josh took the phone from my hands. "Amanda, you were never my wife. You were an actress hired to steal from my family. And now you're going to pay for every lie, every manipulation, every moment you made my father feel humiliated in his own home." "Josh, don't." "Goodbye, Amanda," Josh said, and hung up. Marcus closed his briefcase and stood up. "You will probably be called to testify during the trial, but from now on, you are completely safe. Amanda and her associates will be in prison for a long time." As Marcus prepared to leave, Josh approached me. "Dad," he said, tears in his eyes, "will you forgive me for everything I said? For letting her humiliate you? For doubting you?" I hugged my son, feeling as if we were reconnecting after years of distance. "Josh, you were the victim of a sophisticated criminal operation. People trained to manipulate exactly the way Amanda did." Thomas put his hand on my shoulder. "Kevin, there's something I haven't told you yet." I looked at him, bracing myself for another revelation. The investigation into Amanda revealed something interesting about that $15,000 she mentioned, Thomas said. "She knew about the kitchen renovation because she had hacked into your bank accounts months before she met Josh. The entire relationship was planned from the beginning, based on stolen financial information." The anger I felt at that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. It wasn't just about being deceived, but about the complete violation of Marie's memory. "There's more," Thomas continued. "Amanda wasn't just planning to steal money. She was gathering information for an eventual charge of mental incapacity against you, Josh as the sole heir, and then a convenient accident that would eliminate Josh as well." Josh turned pale. She was going to kill me?" Marcus nodded. "The plan was detailed. Amanda wasn't just a con artist, Josh. She was a murderer." It was at that moment that I fully understood how close we had come to losing everything. Not just money or property, but our very lives. "Thomas," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "how can I ever thank you for saving our family?" "Kevin," he replied, hugging both Josh and me, "family is family. And no one messes with the Hartwell family." But as we celebrated our victory and safety, none of us imagined that Amanda would have one last card to play. A revelation that would completely change our understanding of the entire situation. 3 weeks after the trial, Josh and I were in the kitchen that Amanda had tried to use as a weapon against my memory of Marie. He was learning to make his mother's chocolate cake, following the handwritten recipe we found in a forgotten drawer. "Dad," Josh said, Stirring the batter carefully, the lawyer called today. Amanda was sentenced to 25 years without the possibility of parole. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. What about the others? 17 people in total. The entire organization has been dismantled. Josh stopped stirring and looked at me. Marcus said they'd been operating for over a decade. Hundreds of victims. Thomas entered the kitchen at that moment, carrying a folder I recognized as Amanda's case file. There's something you need to know, he said, placing the folder on the counter. Amanda made a full confession yesterday. She told them about you, Kevin. My stomach clenched. What did she say? She said that of all the families they targeted, ours was the only one that made her question what she was doing. Thomas opened the folder and showed me some handwritten pages. She wrote that Marie had been genuinely kind to her, that you treated her like a daughter from day one. Josh was reading over my shoulder. She also wrote that she regretted lying about loving our family. It was strange to feel compassion for someone who had tried to destroy our lives, but there it was, appearing at the most unexpected moment. What else did she say? I asked. Thomas flipped through a few pages. That Josh was the first man she ever met who truly loved her, without any ulterior motives. That it scared her because she didn't know how to handle genuine love. Josh was crying now, tears dripping onto the cake frosting. That makes it even sadder, doesn't it? Yes, I admitted. It does. We spent the next few months rebuilding our family relationship. Josh moved back home temporarily, not out of dependency, but by choice. He wanted to spend time with us while he processed everything that had happened. Thomas visited more often, and we discovered that our brother was more interesting than any of us had ever imagined. His stories about working for the FBI were fascinating, but nothing compared to the stories from our childhood that we began to reminisce about. 6 months later, Josh met Sarah, an elementary school teacher who works with special needs children. She is kind, honest, and transparent about her life in a way Amanda never was. More importantly, she treats us like real family, not targets. But the biggest change happened to me. I realized that I had spent years after Marie's death just existing, not living. Amanda, in her attempt to destroy me, ironically showed me that I still had a lot to fight for. I started traveling, something Marie and I always planned to do in retirement. I visited all the places she marked in our old atlas. And in each place, I felt her with me, laughing at my failed attempts to speak other languages. Josh now runs the antique shop I opened in the city center. It's small but thriving, full of pieces that tell stories of families who came before us. Sometimes customers ask about the framed photo on the counter, Marie and me on our 20th wedding anniversary. That's my mom, Josh says proudly. She still protects our family. Thomas retired from the FBI last year, but continues to work as a consultant. He says our case was one of the most satisfying of his career, not only because justice was served, but because a family was saved. The last I heard, Amanda was participating in a rehabilitation program in prison, helping other inmates deal with addiction and trauma. Maybe she'll find some peace there. I hope she does. If this story of family manipulation and redemption touched you, subscribe to the channel for more stories of how families can overcome anything when they stick together. I've learned that predators like Amanda thrive in disconnected families, where love has been replaced by suspicion. They can't operate where there is genuine trust and open communication. Today, as Josh and Sarah plan their wedding and Thomas brings the grandchildren to visit, I look at Marie's renovated kitchen and smile. Amanda was right about one thing. She really did put me in my place. My place was to be the protector of this family. And finally, I was back where I belonged.